to the Europeans. He'd visited a lot of companies, and there was really, in the end, he was almost out of luck. And so finally, he came up with the idea. The Japanese were a big part of this project. They had given him and his team the technical skill to build the factory. They also gave him the money. The money came from the reparations fund that Japan had allotted for Korea after the war. So the steel factory was built in 1973. Fast forward to today, POSCO is the 5th largest steel manufacturer in the world, and it supplies most of the steel that's made for the vehicles in Korea. POSCO has operations in India, Vietnam, China, Mexico, and it's continuing to grow. It's just charging on, and Park Tae-jun, obviously he's retired, so he's not there anymore. This was a state-owned company that is now privatized. Okay, so we have the steel. Now we got to build the roads. You know, as you can see, it was a difficult time back then. And so going back to President Park Chung-hee, he had this idea of building the roads. When he put out the request for bids, there were a number of companies that bid for this project. At that time, the amount that they bid was worth about $1.3 billion in today's money. At the time, Hyundai bid on the project. And as you know, Hyundai is founded by Chung Ju-young. Chung Ju-young at that time had a construction company, and it was a fairly new company, but it had some experience. They bid at about less than half of that cost, about $640 million for this road. And one of the reasons why they were able to reduce the cost was by changing the route of the road. It was less serpentine, and as you know, Korea is a very mountainous country. And Hyundai figured out a way to build this road by going through fewer mountains. Of course, they still had to go through mountains, and that was a big challenge. The road, 8 lanes wide, was built in a record short amount of time. It was just over 2 years. And you know, they had a lot of trouble with it. They had to blast through some mountains, but it was built and finished in 1970. President Park and his wife came to the opening ceremony. I just want to read something from the book. At the opening ceremony for the road, Chung Ju-young stood next to President Park and his wife as they cut the ribbon to open the road. Afterward, Park gazed silently out at the long, black, empty expanse of roadway with Chung at his side. All of the cars in Korea, both men knew, would barely fill up a portion of this new highway. Park turned to Chung. The probably apocryphal story goes and asked, "What do you know about making cars?" With visions of his youthful days spent in the auto repair shop probably running through his mind, Chung is said to have simply replied, "I can do it." And now to talk about cars, Sam.
So to tell the story of the actual automobile industry and the automobile manufacturing industry, you have to talk about these two men, Chung Ju-young and Kim Woo-chung, who are the founders of Hyundai and Daewoo, respectively. Chung Ju-young spent time in his early years. He was the eldest son of a agrarian family, and he kept running away from the farm to go to the city to try to make a living in the city. And his father kept going, catching him and bringing him back. He did this 4 times until finally he stayed. And he worked in a rice shop, and he quickly showed his entrepreneurial skills in that rice shop to the point where the owner of the rice shop gave him the rice shop. Said, "You can manage this better than I can." At a certain point, this was during the Japanese occupation of Korea, and at a certain point, the rice operation that he was overseeing became so powerful and so extensive that the Japanese colonial administrators confiscated it, and he became penniless. He started again as an auto repair mechanic, created an auto repair shop in Seoul, and quickly had an operation that was essentially the only auto repair shop in Seoul. In the midst of World War II, the Japanese colonial administrators decided that it was a sensitive military enterprise, and therefore they confiscated it. he became penniless again. After the liberation of Korea, and especially in the midst of the Korean War, Chung Ju-young founded Hyundai, which in Korean means modern, and it was a construction company. And he quickly built it into a very large company, starting by building bases for the United States 8th Army, but also quickly expanding beyond that, building other hospitals and universities and large engineering enterprises. Quickly also going overseas and building projects overseas, especially in the Middle East. Kim Woo-chung came from essentially an aristocratic family. His father was an important politician in the Syngman Rhee administration, and he was in the midst of the North Korean invasion. His father was executed, and his family became penniless. And he was the eldest son and had to put bread on the table, and he did so by delivering newspapers, which is kind of the good old-fashioned American way of making money, right? But he quickly figured out a way to, the way that the other delivery boys were delivering newspapers is they would sell the paper, go and collect the money at the same time. He figured out, well, I'm just going to hand the paper to people. I know everybody in the town. I'm going to come back. I'll be able to hand out more papers that way. I'll come back in the afternoon and collect my money. He quickly cornered the newspaper delivery market in the city, in his hometown, and thus started his entrepreneurial career. Daewoo and Hyundai also grew to become large conglomerates with multiple business interests. And in the lead up to the 70s, they both entered into the car industry. Now, they both started by producing kits from other car companies. So Hyundai was making Ford Concertinas, I think. It was Ford Cortinas, where essentially the kit would be delivered to the factory in Korea, and it was just a matter of plugging in the parts. Daewoo did the same thing, except with a contract with GM. However, the critical difference was when Chung Ju-young decided that Hyundai was going to be a legitimate car maker on its own right, and wanted to not just put pieces together, but actually make the cars. And that was the real birth of Hyundai, the automobile maker. So I believe it was 1970 when they signed a contract with Mitsubishi. They canceled their Ford relationship, and they signed a contract with Mitsubishi to do a joint venture to build cars from the ground up in Korea. And quickly outgrew that relationship with Mitsubishi and went out on its own. And the first car that was produced, the first truly Korean car, was the Hyundai Pony. Koreans have a weakness for Old West movies, and so I think that's where the origin of that name came from. But the Pony was, not only did they introduce it in Korea, but they introduced it almost immediately in over 30 export markets simultaneously. And it was a very successful car for one primary reason: it was cheaper than anything else. It was a very low-cost car, and the significance of that is important because there were many people in the developing world that simply had no access to automobiles. And this was the first attempt by any global manufacturer to give a car for the masses that the masses could actually afford. There were significant quality problems with the Pony. The doors didn't fit snugly. The cars that were sent to Saudi Arabia, the paint had peeled off within 2 days. But here's where it gets interesting, and the story could have ended there. But one of the things that Chung Ju-young demanded was he sent his managers out to each country that they were exporting to spend time in that country with the cars, right from the moment they got off the ship to the moment they went to the customer, and then after they were with the customer for a while. So one example is in Saudi Arabia. Within days of identifying this problem, this paint problem, the chemists back in Korea had figured